Hello and welcome to the Melanated Veteran Podcast. I am your host, Miss Mesha, and before we begin, the first order of business is to share, like, and subscribe to the Melanated Veteran on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. We're on almost all major platforms: iTunes, Google Play, iHeart, Stitcher, and many more. Check out our website at www.themelanatedveteran.com. So today my guest is someone who they have a business called Living Abundantly. She is a author, financial specialist, counselor, and so much more. Please welcome Brandy Baxter.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. I was very impressed when I looked at your website and everything, and then finding out that you were veteran too. I was like, yes, I have to have this lady on here. I have to have her on here. So, so let's begin. So, what branch were you in, and how long were you in?
Well, I served in the Air Force, and I served for 4 years before I was swept off my feet by a handsome man in a uniform who later became my husband. And so my aunt, she recommended, or suggested rather, she said, if you think this is the man that God has for you, then you might want to not re-enlist, because the military life can be hard on marriages, with everyone's careers going different directions, etc. And so rather than re-enlist at the end of my 4-year enlistment, I decided to go ahead and separate. And I have been happy ever since, just living the life with my best friend and husband.
Oh, that's awesome. A lot of the times it is difficult, especially doing meal to meal. So I'm glad that, you guys are together, that you found your love and everything, and that y'all are making it work. Because I know it could be difficult. So, what made you go into the Air Force?
Well, I had found myself after college, well, I was in my last year of college, and I just found myself lacking direction. And after I graduated, I worked a few odd-end jobs. I'm originally from a blue-collar town in Ohio, and my uncle called me one day, who, by the way, retired Army drill instructor. He called me one day and he says, you are just doing like a lot of random things, and you need order and you need discipline. And at the time, I was like, what is he talking about? He said, have you considered going to the military? And I was like, no, I'm not going to the military. I got a college degree. I don't need that. I'm going to make it work in the job market. Well, little did I know that I really did need some of that order and discipline. And so I just kind of looked into it. And I called him back and I said, well, what would I do if I were in the military? Because I remember visiting him in the summer. They were stationed at Fort Knox. And I remember watching how the troops were trained and what the basic training looked like. And I knew it was not for me. The dirt and the uniform and just all the yelling, I was like, that's not for me. So I said to him, what would it look like for me to join the military? And he said, come on down to Kentucky and I'll show you, because I'm going to introduce you to an Air Force recruiter. And little did I know at the time about the whole branch wars. But I was like, well, what's the difference between Air Force and Army? And there was a world of difference.
Oh, yes. It's very much different. Very much different. My parents, both of them, they were in the Air Force, and they loved it. They loved it. So you get recruited by the Air Force. What? Tell us, what was your thoughts when you actually got into boot camp?
So I'm an academic. All throughout high school, I never did sports. Just primarily books, and writing and reading and all the academic things. So going to basic training for me was this eye-opening, like, oh my gosh, I have never done anything physical before. And, excuse me. And so that was a little challenging because I had not done anything physical. But the interesting thing is I'm the oldest of 4 girls. And once I got to basic training, I recognized that, okay, this is sort of like just a giant sleepover with, my girlfriends. At the time, they were all strangers to me. And so that very next morning, I remember our TI came to me and he was like, you're going to be the dorm chief. And I had no idea what he was talking about. That was not in any of the promotional videos that I had seen about a dorm chief. And I was like, kind of had this confused look on my face. And he's like, you're responsible for these 26 girls. And I'm thinking, responsible? How? These are grown women. Well, little did I know that I was responsible for getting them to appointments on time, getting them to be awake on schedule, and just all the things. And so later in hindsight, I think it was an advantage being the oldest of 4 girls because a lot of those women became sisters to me. Mm-hmm. And how I approached them, having being around 3 different personalities with my own sisters, I recognized, okay, this one needs this type of approach, that one needs this type of approach, etc. And we just banded together. And I'm really collaborative in my leadership, and so I leaned on other people to also be leaders in our group. And that whole experience of, one band, one sound, or we're all in this together, really became true for us in our flight. We didn't have any of our ladies get recycled back. No one had to go back except one girl for medical, but no one dropped out or washed out because we all supported each other. And to this day, one of the girls who was in my flight, she and I are still very good friends. I've attended her wedding. She's come out to visit my family, and it was just a lasting friendship.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's one thing I loved about the military is the camaraderie. And there are people that I still, to this, like you, we still keep up with each other. We make sure that we're good. And it's just something that a lot of people that aren't that haven't served, they won't really necessarily understand.
Right.
I love the fact that you were able to get into that leadership role, and even your childhood being the oldest, that definitely helped. Being able to make sure to help take care of people. So that's something that I love. So you get out of boot camp. Tell me a few little highs and lows of your military career.
Well, my military career was sort of basic, no pun intended. I worked in a medical clinic, and I did medical data processing, helping with pre- and post-deployment briefings, and it was a very standard experience. I worked in a small flight, and we just all kind of knew each other and worked together. I didn't have any major challenges in my military career. The only thing that kind of stands out to me is when I came into the military, I came in enlisted, but I had a degree. Mm-hmm. And so at my duty station, that became a little bit of a point of contention between me and my supervisor because he also had a degree. And I'm not the one to be like, oh, I have this, I have that. But I think for him, it became a bit of a challenge. And so he would make little comments about, so my undergrad is in communications. And so he would say things like, let's let the communications major handle it. Anything that had to do with public speaking. Let's let the communications manager handle it. And so it was very passive aggressive. But, after I survived basic training, I was like, I can handle some passive aggressive behavior.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal. And so that was probably the lowest point for me. But the highest point of my military journey was the same supervisor who thought he was tearing me down by saying, let the communications major handle it, unknowingly put me up for an opportunity that put me in front of a 4-star general.
Oh,
And here I
wow.
am, a E3, E4, and I'm giving a presentation in front of a 4-star general, and it was amazing. So much so that the general coined me because the presentation was that great. And so that was the highest high for me of my career. Even my husband, who has an extensive military career, was never coined by a 4-star general. And so that's always been the highlight for me. The very thing that someone thought they were going to use against me to tear me down ended up being a vehicle for elevating me. And so that was really exciting. I also think about the friendships. You know, one of the girls that I met at my duty station, she and I became fast friends, and she was instrumental in just me meeting my husband and how he and I got together. And even now, she and I still visit and stay in contact, because I just feel like when you have gone through, you know, living in the same space and working in the same space with someone, some people just really become part of the fabric of your life, and they become, you know, more than just comrades. They become sisters.
Absolutely. It's family. They're your family. I love how you said that the one thing that people try to do to bring you down is the thing that ended up building you up to the point where, I mean, a 4-star general, like, as
Yeah.
we call it in the military, like we call it in the Navy, you know, I'm a E3 or E4 nothing in front of
Right.
you know.
Right.
So that's that's awesome. I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
So you get out of the military, you meet your you marry your husband. How did you start? How did you get into doing finance, especially from you were a communications major? How?
Yes, that is that is an interesting connection. So when hubby and I married, we talked about everything but our finances, interestingly enough. And so that first year of marriage, almost the first 3 months of marriage, to be quite honest, we had combined our income and our expenses. And so when I sat down to do our budget to figure out, okay, what needs to be paid, how much, I recognized that I had a small kind of molehill of debt. He had a small molehill of debt, and together we had a mountain of debt. And we didn't have a plan for how to tackle it. So we reached out to our bank, and they connected us with the insurance sales. And I'm like, no, it's not insurance that we need. It's education. Like, what is the best path to do this? What are the best practices for managing household debt? And so we didn't go with the insurance. We had a friend at our church who was an accountant, thinking, okay, surely this would be the path. Our accountant said, well, let's take care of your taxes first. Let's pay the taxes for the year, and then we'll do budgeting. Unfortunately, we spent so much energy focusing on taxes that we still didn't have a handle on the budgeting. Third, we went to a financial planner thinking, okay, surely you're going to help us plan our finances. And after meeting with this gentleman, he tells us, no, you have too much debt. You're not ready for financial planning, which at the time I was ignorant to the differences in all of these different professionals. So after that, I was feeling devastated, and I just went home, and I knew the information was there, and it was my job to go get it. So I subscribed to financial magazines. I read a ton of financial books. I was all over the internet, how to build a budget, how to build a family budget, how to build a household budget. And I recognized that everyone essentially was saying the same thing in a different way. And so I just started applying those principles, you know, cutting our expenses as much as we could, looking for creative ways to increase income, calling and negotiating terms of agreement with some of our creditors. And before long, I started seeing the impact. I started seeing that our debt was declining, but our income was also increasing. And it was just through perfect timing that my husband got an assignment overseas, and a lot of our expenses were compensated by being overseas, and so we were able to take his income and make larger payments to our debt so we could get it paid down a lot sooner. And so once I started doing that and seeing it work in our family, I was like telling everyone, here we are overseas, and I was in a location where I was not allowed to work as a spouse because of the SOFA agreement. And so I decided telling the other spouses, hey, if you guys do this, you can save money. If you look for deals, you can save money. If you leverage a military discount, you can save money. And one of the spouses, she was like, you should teach a class. And I am a lifelong learner, and so I never want to just jump out and teach something without knowing it. So I enrolled in an online course for financial planning, thinking that would be the way to go for me. And as I was learning about financial planning, I recognized that financial planning is about wealth management. So people that already have accumulated sums of wealth, they need that wealth to be planned. But what about everyday people who are trying to accumulate wealth? What about everyday people whose families didn't have conversations with them about money? And I recognized that's where my heart was leading me, to be an advocate for people who, like me, didn't have the financial education to know the best practices to simply manage their household budget. And so that was the transition. It really spawned out of my own personal experience and what I had gone through, and also seeing it work. And so rather than, again, just jumping out saying, hey, this works for me, let me teach you, I was awarded a fellowship with the Association of Financial Counseling, Planning, and Education, and I pursued certification as a financial counselor so that those people that worked with me would know that I had invested the time, the energy, and the education to be the best that I could be for them.
Wow. Like, the fact that you started from telling people, like, you finding that information out yourself, and then, telling other people, and you went for it. Like, that's it's awesome that you did all the research and everything for that, because again, a lot of times things can be overwhelming, and sometimes it's like, well, where do I even start? Like, how do I even? And the fact that you were like, okay, everybody's saying the same thing, let me find out more information. And the fact that you're helping other people, coaching other people, I was impressed, because like I went through and I looked at your website and seeing everything that you offer for people, especially one that I like is that you deal with faith-based. That's one that I really, really love, is that you're doing that with faith-based. And your when it comes to with the divas, budgeting divas, making sure like divas dollars dreams, I love it. And looking at your book, like, how did you come up with the book? I was stalking your website, because it's amazing, because there's so much, like, I wish people would have told me, like you had said, growing up, we knew about finances, but we didn't really know budgeting and everything. So
let me tell you about the divas. Wow. I laughed out loud, because this was purely, I don't want to say accidental, but it was unplanned. I'll say it was unplanned. I was invited to give a presentation, actually at a Women Veterans event. And the host said, I know you do personal finance, and we want you to give a presentation, so we want it to be fun. Everyone is accustomed to finances being boring or whatever, so we want you to Give us something fun.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay. And this particular person had heard me speak before and knew that I had the ability to do this. And the week or so before the presentation, my daughters and I went to a summer opera for kids, and they were doing the operatic version of The Three Little Pigs. And it was so creative and so fascinating that it was in my mind. And so as the deadline is approaching for me to give this presentation, I'm racking my brain. I'm like, I don't have anything creative yet. Like, come on, Brandy, you can do this. And all of a sudden, the lyrics from this performance started coming to my mind, and it hit me. Each pig represented a different mindset. So I was like, oh my gosh, over the years, I've worked with women who approach their finances differently. And so from that quick moment, I started crafting these 3 money personality types similar to the 3 little pigs. And so I was super excited that when I gave the presentation, the women felt my excitement, and they too were like, oh my gosh, this is so creative, that it was enjoyable. But again, it was a presentation. So a friend of mine who is an author, she said to me, she would happen to be at this presentation, she was like, you need to write this as a book. She said, I have never heard anything like this. It's super creative, and more women will connect with it. And I was like, I don't have time to write a book. I'm a mom. I've got 2 kids, a full-time job, blah, 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 blah. Well, about a year or so later, I felt a call to pursue higher education. And so I resigned from my job and enrolled in a doctorate program, which gave me a little bit more flexibility in my schedule. And so the seed that she had planted a year ago started taking root and started sprouting. Write this book. Write this book. And so I took all my notes from the presentation and did a little more character development and literally wrote the book in a matter of months. And the timing was so perfect because I was then invited to a leadership symposium for women veterans, and I was able to be one of the authors to have my book in their bookstore. And I feel like that just catapulted the awareness of my book into heights and to levels that I could not have imagined.
Wow. See, a lot of times we get in our own way and we're like, no, I can't do this. No. And look what you've done. Like, I was impressed, especially making it about like the 3 little pigs, because when you think about it, each one, we are like that. Like each there's somebody that's that kind of style. I love it. So I'm in awe at everything, because I've never really seen anybody like that many, because it's something that seems like it's so easy for anybody to understand. Like, because a lot of times, there's all that, like that jargon, as you said, like the big words, and it's like, just give it to me straight. And seeing how this is, I'm like, okay, I could understand this. Like, I could definitely understand this.
And I'm glad you recognize that, because that was my intent. I wanted this to be a book, and it's actually a workbook. It's like a mini workbook. I wanted the book to be something that women could grab, drop in their bag, and, on their lunch break, read a little bit, do a little activity, and continue to make progress. I didn't want it to feel like overwhelming and challenging and, something that was homework. I wanted it to feel fun and easy so that it was approachable, because a lot of times we don't talk about our finances because it feels like, oh, someone's going to tell me not to do this and I really want to do it anyway. Or someone's going to make me feel like how that financial planner made my husband and I feel so many years ago. Like, oh, wait, you have too much debt. I can't do anything for you. And that's not the case. We can all start somewhere. And it's just, when I wrote the book, I wanted the reader to feel like this is a place where I can start.
That's great. That's great. So what were some bumps along the road, like especially when it comes to making the book, and then your website and everything. What were some, like, especially if someone's wanting to start a business, what is some advice that you would give someone?
So first, I want to tackle the bumps. Just the lack of knowledge that I had created fear. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, you look around on social media and everyone has glossy websites and super perfect posts. And so you feel like, well, I don't know how to do that, so I can't, get started. Mm-hmm. Those were a lot of the bumps that I had. I felt like I had to look like something else. And I started spending a lot of time around entrepreneurs, and I had to realize everyone is on their own journey. Just because what I see on their social media and on their website, that doesn't mean that they too are not figuring something out. And so I had to give myself the grace to say, okay, this is your journey. You're figuring out, everyone's figuring out, but don't let that stop you. So the advice I would give to anyone is start where you are. And don't be afraid to receive advice. Sometimes we feel like if someone offers a suggestion or if someone makes a recommendation, that it's somehow a negative reflection on us. But actually, the most learning takes place when someone else is willing to say to you, there's a different way. And for me, that's been the greatest gift. Hanging around entrepreneurs who are so far ahead of me, but who are able to say, okay, Brandy, I saw your website and this link is broken and that link is this or this, that, and the other, or you might want to change the graphics or you might want to change this based on what they know. I receive that and I'm like, yes, thank you. Versus, well, who do they think they are? I don't have a budget for a website designer and blah, 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 blah. But rather than focusing on what I don't have, then I say, okay, well, in the space that I'm in, at the level that I'm at, how can I apply their suggestions so that I can present better? And so that's the thing I would encourage people is don't be afraid to receive feedback and suggestions. And then also don't feel pressure to be somewhere you're not ready to be. And by that, I mean, like, I don't have a marketing budget. So a lot of marketing that I do is via podcasts or interviews or things like that. And I'm okay with that. And so people have to get to the place where they're like, you know what, this is where I am, and be okay with it. But then also not hesitate to look for opportunities to do the next thing that's available to them.
Absolutely. And, these people that were entrepreneurs, it didn't happen overnight. And I think a lot of times, and especially social media, we're like, oh, well, it's just like with the microwave and microwave era. Oh, it has to happen right now, right now, right now. But no, like, it takes time. I like how you mentioned, don't be afraid to, ask for help. Don't be afraid to take that, if there's some kind of criticism. It's just they're helping you. They're helping you make things a lot better.
Right.
So I love it. So before we wrap up, tell everybody where they can find your business and everything, where they can find you.
So the easiest way to find me is probably on LinkedIn, surprisingly. I spend more time on LinkedIn. I also have 2 websites that I maintain with email addresses. So you can always find me at Brandy, with a Y, Brandy, Brandy Baxter, Baxter, at brandybaxter.com. That's my main website. And then I also have the website for my business, which is Living Abundantly. And that website is time and then the number 2, Live Abundantly. And I chose that because I wanted everyone to come to my website to recognize that it was time for them to live abundantly. So it's time to liveabundantly.com. and that's my website. But you can always just send an email to coach, COACH, at brandybaxter.com, and I'll be able to reach that as well.
Okay. Brandy, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and, you know, doing the interview and talking to us about, you know, finances and what needs to be done. So again, I want to thank you. You can find me at the Melanated Veteran. Again, I'm on Facebook, IG, and YouTube. Don't forget to check out the website, www.themelanatedveteran.com. I'm your host, Miss Mesha, signing off, saying embrace what makes you, you.